Sweet. Welcome to night 6 of our 8-week course. So this will really be the last kind of net new things that we learn. Well, I guess night 7 too, but night 7 will really be starting. What we'll do is we'll pretty much start and build the kind of bones of our final project for night 8. So we'll go through everything that we need, get everything all set up, ready to go. So you aren't starting from scratch on the final night. And then night 8, you essentially will just be going in, adding stuff to it, cleaning it up, putting your own little pizzazz on it and everything. So after tonight, it's all about working towards the final project. So we're really, really close. I am going to show what that final project is when we get through storytelling, just so you guys have some kind of frame of reference of what's next after this. But otherwise, we'll go ahead and get into it. This is wrong. Okay, so tonight we'll be covering the analytics pane, which I talked kind of briefly through last week. So in Tableau, obviously there's a ton of data viz stuff, but there's also a lot of really powerful data science stuff. So we'll go through some different constant average and reference lines, how to build some medians with quartiles, a box plot, k-means clustering, which is a machine learning algorithm, some different trend lines, and then some seasonality forecasting as well too, all of which we'll go through in depth. I am actually going to try to squeeze all of this in kind of the first hour and use the second hour to work ahead a bit so that we have plenty of time next week. Because I was going through night 7, I'm like, there's just no way we get through all of this on Monday. So going to try to front load some of that as well too. So hopefully we can fly through the analytics pane to work ahead a little bit. But as always, we'll start with storytelling. I appreciate everyone that sent the stuff over to me before this. I know a couple of people had questions as well too, so obviously I'll help you work through that as we get going. But I'm just going to go through the first 3 that people have sent me in order that you sent them to me. So to start, Christelle, if you don't mind, I'll pull yours up and we'll kind of talk through that.
I did something really more simple. I just wanted to see the prices of candles in Nebraska. I think mainly there's businesses a lot from Lincoln and Omaha. And I wanted to price my candles, but then I thought they were like way too expensive. But then after pulling this, I'm like, oh no, my prices are not expensive. So basically the 8 ounces candles, they vary from like $24 to at the cheapest $79.99. And then I noticed that they're also kind of half toward the 20 something and then half toward $10 something.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's it.
I love it. What's your company? Is that okay?
And that's not there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're just using this for some competitive intelligence?
Yes.
Sweet. How'd you find the data? Just Googling or?
I Googled all the businesses that Google can find, show me in Nebraska. And then I filtered by companies only that mainly sell candles and sprays. And I removed the bigger brands. Yankee Candles. And then just implemented Excel. At first I had everything with room sprays and wax and different stuff. The data did not make sense to me compared to what I wanted to understand price wise. So I just removed everything and then kept the 8 ounces since that's around the size of the candles that I have.
Yeah. I love that. That's a super cool use case. And it's funny that you're doing this because I was actually in an all-day workshop today at Buildertrend around what our pricing should be. And you do a ton of competitive analysis too and kind of see what the cheaper options are, what the more expensive options are, what you want your value prop to be. Do you want to be seen as kind of a high-end, a luxury item? Do you want to see as like kind of an entry-level point as well? Is there a nice little like midpoint where you can maximize sales but also maximize dollars as well too, because it typically trends off? So yeah, this is super applicable to kind of a real world example where you would dive in and do stuff like this. So cool. Hopefully it helps you as well too.
Yeah, it helped a lot.
Love that. Very cool. Nice work. All right. The next one was Kobe. So I will pull yours up real quick. Actually, hold on. I'm going to save yours to the end because I have a little spiel that I want to go off of after you present yours. So give me 1 second. We'll go to Jonathan next, actually. Oops. Yeah. Do you want me to start at the beginning?
Yeah, I guess we can go through each one by one. So I guess to give everyone context, there's this activist group called Quartiles who do kind of statistical analyses of gender disparities, racial disparities in museums and exhibitions. I was really inspired.
Real quick, John. Folks online, can you hear them all right? Because my microphone's on the opposite end of the room. Kind of. Do you mind just popping down a couple of rows? Sorry.
Yeah,
The owl does not do a good job of picking up stuff along the way. Okay, back to you.
So I was just inspired by this activist group who were really active kind of like in the 1980s. So I chose 4 museums in the New York City area, and I went through their websites and I gathered some data on all solo exhibitions, and I basically plotted all that. And this was a very simple one. It was just to see how many exhibitions per museum in Manhattan they had between 2021 and 2024.
Love that. And you're working ahead. One of the things I want to cover tonight is maps. So this is great practice, but we'll go through that as well too. But yeah, perfect use case for this.
And this one's another pretty simple visualization, but it's really showing you kind of the gender disparity, see which museum has, whether it has a male or female bias in their yearly exhibitions. The Whitney Museum did have a few interesting, there was an AI artist who doesn't exist and doesn't really have a gender, so that one was kind of an outlier. And the Metropolitan had a duo, which was both a male and a female, working together to take photos. So visualizing that.
So how'd you go through and actually collect this data? Was it website by website or?
Yeah, it was just going to the 4 websites and just going to their exhibitions and going through them one by one. It did take a lot of time.
Yeah.
But I'm really happy with what I was able to kind of visualize and infer with all that data.
Yeah, love that.
Same thing, but instead of gender, this one was on race. And then this one was a bar chart of all exhibitions categorized or grouped together by race. Same thing but with gender. And this is part 1 of another one, but of all over 150 exhibitions, these were the top 5 artists who had more than 1 exhibition. Pablo Picasso being the one with 3 exhibitions throughout that time period in those 4 museums.
Love that. Is there a part 2 you want me to go to next, or just keep working through?
Just keep working through.
Okay.
I think it might even be the next one. This one, just to see which is the most popular medium use of painting, obviously, was the genre most exhibited within that time frame in those museums.
And I love that you have the filter over here too. I was just getting ready to say it would be cool to see how these change between it all, but giving the user a self-service filter here is a great use case.
Yeah, you can definitely see like the Metropolitan skews more towards like classical art, and the Whitney being kind of a more contemporary museum that shows digital media, video, things like that.
Yeah, that is interesting.
Just a line chart of the most popular mediums. Nothing crazy.
Is there a reason that installation's kind of going up and to the right over time?
It's kind of a catch-all because it includes like sculpture, painting, things made on walls. So anything that's not a painting, everything that a lot of artists just like you do a lot of things.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Line chart with gender, so we can see sort of pretty equal overall. What's this graph type called? Is it a bubble chart?
That's a great question. I don't know actually what the official name is.
I just threw all the artists in just to see
Yeah.
them all. I did do a calculated field just to do their last name. The person couldn't fit. I mean, some of them.
Oh, smart.
Out.
Yeah.
I think it was the trim function, the artist's name, and then -1 to get that last name.
Awesome. Yeah, great use case.
Same thing, but to see which nationalities exhibit the most in those museums. Just some dashboards that I created. So we already went through that.
Gotcha. Yeah, this is great. I think these bubble charts or whatever, I'd kind of put them in the same category as like a pie chart, where they do a really good job of demonstrating some things that are really large or some things that are really small or some things that are really equal to points like this. It definitely jumps off the page right away when you have something like the American bubble here, which you can see takes up the large majority of it. But yeah, super cool use case here. And awesome work. I'm sure it was painstaking at time to collect all this data. Anytime, if you guys want to, that you go through and you feel like you want this data out in the public, you can upload data sets to Data World or whatever. And then other people can search for them and find them that way as well too. So I've done a couple things, like I'm really into The Office, and I went through and collected a whole bunch of data one time based on like how many character appearances each character made like per episode, and then correlated that with the IMDb like ranking of that episode. So you can see like episodes that have a lot of Michael Scott were like typically highly ranked. Yeah, I went ahead and published that to Data World. I'm not sure if anyone's ever used it, but it makes me feel like I'm contributing to the data society a bit. So this would be a great use case. So then that way someone else doesn't have to go through it and find all this stuff too. Cool. Thank you. All right, now I'll toss it over to you, Kobe.
Cool. All right. So what I did here, my fiance and I are actually in the process of starting a mobile bar business. So really, I just made my Google sheet and kind of structured it with some information that I'd like to track once we do get that going. And then I just made up some data to put in there to build these charts. I really just tried to structure it like the Superstore data because it's super clean and easy to work with. So I even copied the names for their categories and stuff. So like you can see the top one, I looked at sales and profit. And I looked at sales a little different. I did it more as the number sold. So like if you hover over sold hypothetically 132 Bud Lights and profited $560 off that. So that's kind of how I looked at that. And then obviously revenue by category, comparing beer and liquor revenue, and then just the monthly profit. I only put 1 month of data in there, so it's only going to show that. But yeah, so basically just kind of set it up to how I want to track in the future, and then kind of do some fine tuning and add a couple more things. I've already been thinking today about some more things that I want to add that I just haven't got to yet.
Love it. Thanks, Kobe. So the reason I wanted him to go is we were slacking back and forth. And this is actually, he said, I just kind of made up data or whatever. It's not real yet. That's actually a really standard process when you're rolling out net new things. It's something that we try to do at the beginning of different products or different tactics that we're rolling out. So one of my main jobs at BuilderTrend right now is kind of strategic implementation or implementation of strategic plans. So we say, hey, I'll give you a real world example. So BuilderTrend is a software product. We sell someone on the sales team, and then they get a dedicated customer success manager who onboards them and teaches them how to use the product. We had a hypothesis that we need to get the product set up for them before we start onboarding them. So we need them to send us all their employees, all of their jobs that they're working on, all of their cost code and accounting system, stuff like that, and actually build that into the product for them. So when we're teaching them, we're using their real data used from their real business. So that it's easier for them to learn. But we couldn't get people to send us that data because they were so excited to get in and start using the system right away. So we're like, okay, we're going to test gating the product and saying you can't actually get in and use the product until you send us all this. So that way we can get it set up and then you'll be able to use it. So that's the type of like project or like test that we want to run. The very first question, anytime you are building a new product or testing something or implementing a new tactic or anything like that, should be, what does success look like? How are we going to measure this? And based on what we're measuring, what are we going to deem this is successful versus this is not successful? And forcing people to have those conversations on the front end forces them to be brutally honest about how much conviction they have in the tactic or product that they're getting ready to sell. It's like, okay, well, we think if we implement this, what we're going to try to change is the number of customers that cancel in the first 90 days. It's like, okay, well, right now it's 10% of all customers that sign up cancel in the first 90 days. What do we think this is going to move to? We think we can get it down to 5%. Okay, that's our success metric. We were saying that we're going to move retention from 10% to 5% over the first 90 days. Now, me, as a data scientist or a data analyst or whatever, what I would want to do is, there's nothing worse in the world of something going live for the first time and people say, how's it going? You're like, I don't know. I'm just building out the dashboard right now. Like, give me time. And like, there's a lot of eyes on it. So what I would always go and do is I would build out a fake data set of saying, okay, here's what the fields I would need. Here's what we think the numbers are going to look like. Here's some other additional points that we'd want to capture. Here are the things I want to filter by. And I would use that to build out a fake dashboard. So what that would allow me to do is like, okay, are we capturing all the data we need to actually measure this? How do we want to capture it so that it's easy for me to build into Tableau? And then I can start iterating with people saying, hey, is this everything that you would need to track in order to deem is this successful or not? So then when they go through and they're like, okay, how are we collecting this data? I can just give them my fake data set and say, I want you to collect it this way. It should be written into our database exactly like this. So then they don't have to worry about going back and forth of like, well, what's Charlie going to want, or what's the data science team going to want? Are we capturing everything they need? What things aren't we capturing? What does the formatting want to look like? Things like that. They just replicate what I built out for fake. Then the really cool point is, as soon as it goes live, all you have to do is switch your data set in Tableau from your fake Excel sheet to the live database connection, and everything just funnels in automatically. You don't have to build a new dashboard. All you're doing is changing the data set. So day one, when it goes live, when you make the very first sale and you start having data come in, your dashboard's already all set up and ready to go. So there's a lot of benefits for building out these prototypes before you actually have data to work with, because it forces you to think through a lot of different things that if you didn't think through, it would go live and you may not even be capturing the right data to actually measure what you want to perform. I typically go through this in 2 stages. The first thing I would do is, I'm a huge whiteboard fan. If you guys are pen and paper fan, or like if you're a designer and you want to build it up in Canva or something like that, like feel free to do that. But before I even get into Tableau, I sketch out exactly what I want my dashboard to look like, what I want to measure, everything like that. So then I have this end goal that I'm building towards. Then I go through, okay, what data do I need to collect to make that? So then I start building out my fake data set, which is exactly what you guys did today, or for this week, is go out and build a data set. Then once I have my fake data set, then I build into Tableau. And then from there, all the hard work's done, and I'm done before the thing had even gone live before. So I thought this was a really, really cool use case that Kobe built out, which is why I wanted to share it last, because it's super applicable to kind of how I operate in my day-to-day role today, where thinking about these things prior to going live just has ample benefits across the board. Any questions about that kind of like process or thoughts there?
Where do you get the numbers from? Do you look at past data, you just make that?
Yeah, I mean, I would look at past data or just like gut check it, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter because I'm just using it to have something in there to fill. But yeah, especially if I'm going to be showing it to people, even though I'm just trying to get their feedback on like, is this the right metrics and the right format and stuff? If you have something that's like astronomically off, they'll be like, well, that's not what it's going to be. I'm like, I know it's not what it's going to be. It's not the point. But yeah, that's a good question. Cool. Let's go ahead and jump in to today, because like I said, I want to try to get through all of today, maybe in the next 40 minutes, at least the next hour. So then we can start working ahead a little bit. So the analytics pane, that's what we're going to be covering tonight. I showed you where it was at in Tableau. Up to this point, we've covered the data source tab and how to bring data in. We've covered different sheets. We've covered the formatting option. When you right click, choose format. Dashboards, stories, night one, I showed you, but we don't really use them a whole lot. But the hidden, most exciting tab of them all, in my opinion, is this tiny little analytics pane here. So I've stated this, I think, at the beginning of every class, why I'm so excited that this is the first class on your guys' curriculum, is it teaches you the full spectrum of data science. So we've talked about the top visualizations, which is truly the data viz. We've talked how to connect and transform the data, which is the data engineering. Last week 2 weeks ago, we did calculated fields, which is the formulas. Actually, real quick, Patrick, do you mind sending that screenshot you sent me of your if statement in the chat? I thought that was pretty awesome. Patrick did a little like budget calculator thing, which I didn't want to show in front of the whole class because he pulled raw data straight from his bank account. But he did do a pretty extensive if statement. And I know I talked last week, you can make those as long as you want, which I think is pretty funny. So I can pull it up right now.
Well, I mean, it is 2003 data, and it doesn't reveal any real personal information except for spending habits. But like my bank has one when I log into the app, and it just never categorizes things appropriately, or I just have this giant slice of uncategorized stuff.
Yeah.
And so with this, I can just pull the raw data in there, and with this calculation, it looks for all the keywords and then categorizes it however I see fit.
Yeah, which is awesome. I'm sure that was not easy to do, but so I wanted to give you a shout out there. So that's if statements are just a real basic format of coding as well. And then we talked about different ways to analyze the data using those quick table calcs and running totals and medians and things like that. But tonight we're finally on to kind of what I'd call the end of the spectrum, which is the data scientist portion. So the concepts we're learning tonight will be high level to pick up right away, but we'll prepare you for future classes and careers. Like we're not going to go through and talk about how to build a random forest model tonight. We're not going to talk through and discuss the pros and cons of adding seasonality into a forecast. We're not going to talk through the concepts of multidimensional k-means clustering because Tableau lets you drag and drop and do those. So it'll be high level enough to be like, oh, I can understand when I would use a k-means cluster. I can understand when I would build a linear regression and what would be the use case for it without actually having to learn how to build it. So hopefully when you get onto some of the different classes in this curriculum, you'll be like, oh, I know what those things are. And you'll have what the output is to understand why you're actually building it. So I think it's exciting. Maybe I'm a nerd, but we'll go through it super quick so it won't matter anyway. We'll cover all the options just like we did on Monday. But we could like I said, we could easily spend a good 3 hours on just any one of these on their own. These are the different ones that we'll go through. We'll actually skip some of the ones at the end because they're pretty duplicative. But I'm not going to go through PowerPoint. So let's go ahead and open up Tableau and get into it. And while everyone's opening up Tableau, I'm going to grab a water bottle. So I'll be right back. If you guys are working ahead, feel free to pass me. We'll upload our Superstore data just like always and pull in the orders table. Shoot. All right, Microsoft Excel, Superstore, orders, and we're on to the sheet. All right, let me pull this up to make sure I'm following along, doing the things I need to do. Okay, this is all easy. So let's go ahead and start with, we're going to build out kind of our base view here and then use it for all of this stuff. So stick with me as we build out something that kind of looks pretty because we'll be using it for the rest of the night. So let's go ahead and bring in order date onto our columns. And then let's go ahead and bring in order date again and this time choose month, which we've done before. So now we have 2014, 2016, 15, 16, 17, January, February, March, April, May, June, July. And then let's go ahead and just bring on sales onto our rows. So we get something like this. All right. And then let's hide order date. Remember, you just right click on this, hide field labels and columns. Let's double click on the axis and remove sales. And then let's right click on one of the months down below here. Go format. And remember, change that date to an abbreviation. All right, then last thing, let's go ahead and get rid of those grid lines there. So let's right click anywhere, choose format. And again, they're going horizontally. So if we click over on the right where it says lines, choose rows, just get rid of those grid lines. All right, now we have a pretty dashboard that we're going to be looking at for the next 40 minutes. So it's worth the time and repetition. The first thing, so over here where it says data, right, this is what we're used to looking at over on the left. If instead of data, you choose analytics right beside it, you now have this option here. So it's divided into 3 sections. We'll really only cover the top 2. Summarize is kind of what it sounds like. Just real quick, easy ways to kind of summarize what's showing on your view. Model is going to be the kind of data science models. So we'll go through confidence intervals, trend lines, forecasting, and clustering. And then custom, it's its own separate section here. I think Tableau just did it to make it, it's kind of similar to what we did on Monday, where there's a whole bunch of options. And then there's the year ones down below where it just makes it easier, but it's kind of the same thing. These are all, we'll already cover reference lines. We'll already cover reference bands, distribution bands. It just gives you some more options inside those. So if you need to make it slightly different than how it is out of the box, it just tosses it down into its own custom thing. But we won't cover that because we can already do it with all of these things up above here. So we'll start out just to properly set expectations for y'all. The summarized ones are really boring, so we'll rip through them real quick. But then the model ones get pretty exciting. So just stick with me. So for anything in the analytics pane here, I guess let me pause real quick. Everyone where we're at right now. Need me to go back through anything? Okay. So in the analytics pane, you're always going to drag it over. And as soon as you start dragging it, it will give you a little option here. So just to show you what I mean, like the constant line, it only gives you one option. Later, when we drag over trend lines, see how it gives you kind of 5 different options here. For totals, it'll give you subtotals, 3 different options there. So you're always going to take it and drag it. Oh, Siri, thought I said her name. And this one just has one option. So just drag it. You'll see it'll highlight orange when you're over it and drop it on that table there. So this is a constant line whose use case is, or definition is in its name. It's just going to be a line across your dashboard or across your view that has at one constant value. So for this one, let's set it at like 50,000. And now the use case for this would be like if we wanted to set like what our monthly targets are. Maybe we just want one line across the board there. I actually think someone did this in their homework assignment earlier this year where they created their own calculated field. Say we want to try to get $100,000 every single month. We'd set it up here. Really, really straightforward. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about it. It's a line. Now, the one thing to note that we'll use for all of these is if you right click on that line and choose edit, it gives you some different options here. So right here, you can see you can update the value. If we wanted to make that 100K, we could do that. Right click, edit. You can see in here, just because I brought in, it's a constant line, It's going to give you a constant. We could change it, but then that would be essentially some of these down below. So let's just keep it at constant. The label is interesting. It gives you a few different options here. So right now, you can see for the label, as options are none. That just means no label, right? It'll just be the line. The value, 100K, is just whatever we type in here, right? A computation would be if I actually wanted to type a calculated field. We're not going to do that right now. And then custom is typically what I do, because that allows you to give like a little bit more clarity. So I can actually type in goal and you can see that updates. And then this little arrow lets you bring in anything else that you want to bring in from the original option set as well too. So if I do value, now I have the word goal, so I can actually clarify a little bit what that line is. But I could do, if I chose what the computation is, right now it's just 90,000. I could choose the field name, where you can see this is sales. So and it's all dynamic based on what's in here. But I would say most of the time I just choose a custom. I give it some sort of label, and then I just show the value. Tooltip being automatic, that just means when you hover over here, it's going to show the value. But again, edit. I could change that tooltip to be custom, and I could type in the sales goal for the year is 90,000. Or actually, I wouldn't even need to type in 90,000. I could say, make it dynamic is the value, which would be 90,000. So now when I hover over it, you can see the sales goal for the year is 90,000. So I want to spend some time, or I wanted to spend some time talking through this edit pane, because the edit pane is actually exactly the same for a lot of these things over here. So when we go through box plots, you can see we could just choose box plots here. When we go through distribution bands, we could just choose the distribution here. The only other thing down below in the formatting, you could change the line a little bit if you wanted it to be dashed or a different color or something like that. You could also fill above. All that's saying is just, right, fill above, kind of what it sounds like. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll do a fill below and do like a real light color or something like that. So then that way, ones that got ahead or above kind of stick out a little bit. But typically I just kind of keep it none and none. Any questions on the constant line or any of those different edit options in there? Cool. Now to get rid of anything that's on your dashboard here, all you do is click on it and drag it off, and you'll see your cursor will give you a little red X. That's how you get rid of it. But let's go ahead and leave it on this one. Let's rename this constant line, just so we can go back and reference it later. And then let's go ahead and duplicate this so we don't have to start from scratch. All right, everyone, where I'm at right now? Cool. So now let's get rid of this. So drag it off to the side. Let's click back into our analytics pane. Now, when we start dragging over the average line, see that it has a few different options here. Who wants to take a stab at telling me, before we drop it on here, what the difference between these three options would be? Yep, exactly. So let's just go through them one by one. If we drag this on, this is, see how it's going all the way across the table. Now, what I hate about this is it just says average. I have to hover over it to see what the value is, but we know how to change that, right? So let's right click into this. Let's choose edit. And let's change the label from computation to custom. And we can just type in average. Hit this little arrow, choose value. So now it shows average 47,858. Now, let's go ahead and get rid of that. Just drag it off to the side. Let's go back up to our average line and drop it on the pane option here. Now you can see I have 4 different average lines here. I have one for 2014, one for 2015, one for 2016, one for 2017. Again, we won't do this every single time, I promise. But if we edit that, change it to custom, type in average, choose the value. Now you can actually see how those vary. So sales actually went down a little bit in 2015 on average. And then we've had some nice kind of linear growth in 2016 and 2017 going up. And again, to get rid of that, just drag it off to the side. And then the last one, if we drop it on the cell, this doesn't really make sense because there's only one data point for each cell, but the cells would be these individual columns inside of here, right? So the average line is just showing those. However, if we were to like overlay them on top of each other, we could have a few different averages based on all of that. Right, if we were to bring in, just to show you what I mean, if we brought like region onto color here. Now this is super ugly and you can barely understand what I'm talking about. But if we were to look at just March in 2014, or let's just do April, let's highlight one. You can see that there's 4 different data points now inside this one cell. We have central, east, southwest, and there's the little average line inside of there. So if you have multiple things, the average line will work in the cell. So those are kind of the 3 different options here. It's kind of annoying. Get rid of that. But let's just go ahead and drop it back on the pane. Rename this to an average line. Whoa, 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 whoa. Rename this to an average line. And move on. Any questions on average lines? Cool. Let's duplicate it. Let's drag it off to the side here. Go back into analytics and let's choose median with quartiles. I think you guys understand already now the difference between the table, the pane, and the cell. So let's just start with dragging it right onto pane. And you guys should have something like this. Does everyone have this? Cool. So without getting too far into this, I think everyone should be pretty well aware of what the median is, right? It's just out of all the data points, the middle one. So not necessarily the average, but if you start at the top, start at the bottom and work your way down from highest value to lowest value, median is going to be what's right in the middle. Then the quartiles, upper quartile is going to be, I think, 25% by default. It doesn't actually say in here, but I'm pretty sure it's 25%. So it'll go up 25%. So you've captured 75% of your data below that. And then the bottom quartile is going to be down to 25%. So basically just divides up your data into quartiles, right? 4 different groups. A fourth of your data will be in here, another fourth, which would be the median, right? Because you're at half. And then another fourth will be the 75% mark. So this will be good if you want, if you have a ton of different data, you think it's going to be really skewed by outliers. So averages probably aren't a good way to look at it because averages, get dragged up or down by outliers. So you think medians may be a more constant line there, but then you do have a wide range. So you don't want to just show the median. You want to show a nice little band. A median with quartiles will essentially show you inside each one of these bands is 50% of your data. So you can say we have a really wide range in 2017 because we go from 20,000 all the way up to 118,000. So that's why that's a really dispersed band. In 2015, it was a little tighter where we only went from 11,000 to 75,000. So it's a tighter range here. But this is a really good way of capturing kind of what your median, what a lot of your sales, kind of a big band is. The tighter those are, the tighter your data is, the wider are, the more variance you have. Any questions on medians and quartiles? Not necessarily in Tableau, but just the concept in and of itself. Cool. Now, like always, we won't spend a whole lot of time doing this, but you can click into this. You can choose edit. You can choose how many different quartiles. Oh, I guess technically this is, oh, it does say quartiles. Okay, so by default it's quartiles. That just means that there's 4. But in here it says quantiles. So if you want to split it up into 5 or 8 or 3 or whatever you want that to be, you have some different options there. We talked about percentiles a couple of weeks ago. So you can do those as well if you want to show where the 95th percentile is, which would be everything except for the top 5% is above it. So there's a few different things. If you want to show what the standard deviation is, you can do that. But the point is, this is a median with quartiles, and the point is there are ways to change it if you want. Main thing I'd like maybe ever change with the median with quartiles is I typically change it from this ugly gray to something like a little prettier. But other than that, it doesn't really matter. And of course, you can change the label and things like that as well too. Any question on median with quartiles? Cool. All right, let's rename this. Duplicate it. And drag it off. Next one here. Okay, box plot. So just like the show me, how things are grayed out if you don't have the right data for it, analytics is the same way. So it's saying, hey, you don't have the right data in here to show a box plot. That's fine. We can make the right data. So let's change. Let's get rid of our month here. So we just have year in sales. Let's change this to the month year down here. So not the first one that says month, but the second one that says month, where it says May 2015. So we have something that kind of looks like this. Stick with me here. There's a couple more steps. Raise your hand or shout if you get lost. Then let's drag this month off the columns and onto color. So you should have something like this. And then click the arrow on month and choose discrete instead of continuous. So now does everyone have something that looks like this? No? Well, the good news is we can make it way easier than the way I just did it. So if you don't have this, if you got lost, just start a new worksheet and just drag your order date onto color. And here where it says year, hit the drop down and choose the month that says May, the month year, May 2015. And then just hit that arrow one more time and choose discrete. So you should have something like this. And then just drag sales onto rows. So we have something like this. Got that? Cool. All right, last step here. Let's change it from a bar chart. Just choose circle is fine. So now what this is showing is every month, individual month, January 2014, here's January 2016, January 2015, right, is a dot on here, and how high they are is based on how many sales. So November 2017 was the most sales we ever made in a month. February 2014, real slow month, only made 4,000 sales. Okay, so now we can go back to analytics, and you see box plot is highlighted now. If we drag that over, we only have one cell here. So let's go ahead and drag it onto cell, and it'll give us this box plot. Everyone have this so far? Cool. I think that the box plot is kind of hard to see with these giant dots behind it. So let's click into size and drag this way down. Oh, maybe not that far. Maybe something like that. And now box plot, or like in grade school, we called it box and whiskers. Essentially what this is showing is if you hover over it, you have your median, just like before, the upper hinge and the lower hinge, which I believe by default is just like the median with quartiles. So we have that kind of band just like we had before. But we also have what's called an upper whisker and a lower whisker. And this is going to go up to, I believe, your 95th percentile and your 5th percentile to give you kind of a range. It's just a different way of showing. It's a more, there's just same concept as median with quartiles, just with those additional increments in them as well too. If we right click into this to edit, you have some options of where you want your whiskers to extend down to. You can actually hide the underlying marks. So if I didn't want to show, I kind of hid them by making the sizes really small. But you can just hide those completely if you want to. You can choose how thick you want your stuff, what color you want your stuff, some different things like that. But for the most part, it's pretty status quo. Like maybe a nice blue. So maybe here, maybe a better use case would have been if we drug order date back onto the columns. So we have our years. So now you can see that same kind of view there. Maybe you don't want to overwhelm them with a whole lot of data. So you would actually go into here, choose edit, and hide the underlying data. So now instead of showing them, you know, and you don't have to follow along here, I'm just going to recreate this real quick. If we drag this off. Instead of showing them something like this, which is like, hey, here's all the different months by year, you can see it kind of goes up and to the right. This is a lot simpler view of this to say, hey, here's where the medians are at. You can see the different ranges here. This is the maximum and minimum extent of the data. Just a cleaner way of looking at things. Depending on the use cases, though, if we go back to some of those data viz principles we covered night 2, I'm not sure how familiar people are with box plots, box and whiskers. In 6 years of Builder Trend, I've used it maybe 4 or 5 times. But the goal of tonight and the goal of this class is to give you a really, really broad understanding. So when that use case does pop up, you know what to do. Yeah.
Stuff in the medical space. Started asking for some really precise charts all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
100%. Yeah, that's a great call. All right, so we're going to rename this sheet box plot. Let me see what the next, totals. So we don't need to duplicate this. Let's go ahead and just start a new sheet. We'll make this super simple. Let's drag category onto rows. Let's drag subcategory right beside it on rows. And let's drag sales onto text. Okay, real basic table. We've worked with something that looks like this a ton. We've done calculated fields. We've done level of detail calcs where we summed those all up together. We talked how to do it using a calculated field, right? Remember that fixed by category, sum of sales, add all this all up to that 742 number. Then the next week, we're like, hey, we can just do percentage of total using a quick table calc. There's a third, even easier option in the analytics pane if we drag totals under here. If we drag it under, let's just do all of them. If we do subtotals to start, you can see it automatically calculates what the total for each one of those panes are. So here's the total for each individual subcategory and the total for furniture, each individual subcategory, and the total for office supplies, each individual subcategory, and the total for technology. If we go back over to totals, drag again, you'll now see that grays or subtotals is grayed out. And that's because there's already one on there. Well, let's drop it on column grand totals. So now it's going to give you a total for each subcategory and a grand total at the bottom, which is going to total up all your different subcategories. So 742 is for furniture, 719 for office supplies, 836 for technology, and then 2,297,000 for all of those together. Then just for the sake of completion, let's drag region up to columns. Now we should have something like this. We still have our subtotals and our grand total here. If we choose analytics and drag totals over again, now you can see we have a row grand total. We didn't have that before because we didn't have multiple columns, but now each row, this will sum up bookcases across these different regions. I actually use subtotals, column totals, and grand totals on pretty much all of my tables that I build out, because that's just what people are used to looking at. Like, this is a super familiar format. And it's like a good point of reference to just combine stuff over. So I use totals on pretty much every dashboard that I build out. Any question on totals? All right. Yeah, we only got, let's keep ripping. So let me see what I used for an example for these next ones. All right. How many of you guys have heard of confidence intervals before? Confidence intervals?
We used it at Brightfield, and we used confidence intervals with machine learning to explain how certain we are about the category matching that's going on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
So I don't know how to come up with it, but that's how I come up with it.
So if you ever take a statistics class, or I'm sure in some of the data science classes here, you will spend months on confidence intervals. I'm going to try to condense down what they mean in a couple sentences here. Essentially, when you're building a model, depending on how tight you can fit that model, instead of just saying when you're predicting the next value, what your prediction is, you will typically give a range of what that prediction would be. So if I have 5 sales this month, 10 sales next month, 15 sales the month after that, 20 sales the month after that, it's a very, very basic, simple linear regression, right? If I feed that into a linear regression model and say, well, how many sales am I going to have in April? Or let's use October. How many sales am I going to have this month based on the trend that I had here? I'd spit out, well, I would have 25 because I had 5 before, 5 before, 5 before. That would give me a really, really tight confidence interval. But depending on the use case, maybe I want to be better safe than sorry. So I could say, give me a 95% confidence interval, which is going to be really tight, and just say it's probably going to be between 26 and 24, right? We think it's going to be 25, but it's probably going to be between 26 and 24. If I don't care as much, or if I care way more of I don't want to get this wrong, say I'm betting the company on it, or I'm going to invest a ton of money in this. I need to know worst case scenario, how many sales are we going to get? I'd probably give like a 60% confidence interval, which is like, hey, I'm going backwards. Sorry. A 95% confidence interval is going to be really wide because I'm 95% confident that it's going to land in there. So 95% confidence interval is going to be like, I think it's going to be 25. I'm 95% sure it's going to be between 10 and 40, right? Because I'm really confident it's going to land in this range. No way it's going to go higher than 40. No way it's going to be less than 10. I'm really confident. As I get that smaller and smaller and smaller, I'm putting more and more stake in my model being accurate. So I need to be less confident that it's going to fall in that range, right? I'm getting a smaller and smaller and smaller prediction. I'm going to be less and less and less confident. Like, if I gave it like a 50% confidence interval, I could be really, really exact. Like, hey, I think it's going to be between 25 and a half and 24 and a half. That's such thin margins. I need to protect myself and say, hey, I'm only 60% confident in this. I feel like I did a really bad job of explaining that, but essentially it allows you, and your model does it for you. You don't pick those values. You just say, hey, give me a 95% confidence interval range. Give me a 50% confidence interval range. And I'll show that a little bit with these next examples. So in the model here, it's going to give you, I think it's important to understand the model context because averages and medians are kind of boring. But essentially what this is going to do is it's going to give you an average, and it's also going to give you a confidence interval range to say, hey, if we were to predict what another one of these months would look like, here's the range we could say it will land in with 95% confidence. I think it will make more sense when we show the example here. So let's just drag order date onto our columns. Oh, why did it do that? Order date onto our columns. Yep. Let's do order date again and just choose month, just like we did before. And then drag sales on here. So this is the same exact chart that we had before. We won't spend the time to make it pretty. Now, if I drag average with 95% confidence interval, let's just do the table to make it really simple. Right, it looks like kind of that median with quartiles or box plot line or something like that. But what this is actually showing is like, here's our average. And if we were to have another month, and this isn't, maybe I don't want to confuse you guys with order date. This isn't forecasting out where we can bake some seasonality and trends into. This is just saying if these were all created equal, and someone asked me 95% where the next one would land, this would be the range the model would predict with 95% confidence, somewhere between 55,000 and 40,000, which makes sense. If I go into edit here, see how it gives me options on when it says line with confidence interval. Right now it's at 95%. If I choose 99.9%, see how that range gets a lot wider? Because now I need to be more and more confident. I need to be almost 100% confident. So it's giving me a nice wide range because that gives us a bigger bucket for this to fall into. If I were to choose 50%, it's going to be a really, really tight range. It's harder to hit the mark inside of that. So we need to preface it with saying, hey, we're only 50% confident that it's going to land inside this bucket here. Any questions on that? I'm not a stats teacher. It's been 6 years since I've taken it. There will be future classes where you'll learn how to build your own confidence intervals, but at least at a high level, does that make sense? Anyone online, any questions or anything? Did I do a good job explaining that? Shrugs? I'll take it.
You can
cool.
teach stats if you want. I'll take it.
I'll take that. Sweet. So 95% confidence interval, I would say, is kind of like industry standard of any time you're building out a model. You'll typically give your prediction and you'll give your 95% confidence interval. Again, depending on the use case and the risk of getting it wrong, that's where you'd maybe want to give, a 99 point. If I'm like in the medical field or something like that, where the wrong dosage or the wrong prediction of a cancer treatment or something has life-changing effects, I'd probably want to change it to like 99.9 to make sure that we don't mess something up. If it's something like, hey, I really just want to care about what's it supposed to be, what's your best guess, give me the 51%, right? You could change it down to that. It may not seem fancy, but the fact that you can drag and drop this without having to build out any additional models is insane. Sorry, I forgot to rename this one, so I'm going to go back. This is totals. Just making sure I name all these so when I publish it, I can send the link and you guys can know what we're talking about. This will be average with 95% confidence interval. Change back to 95, so I'm not lying. All right, the median with 95% confidence interval, we're actually going to skip. It's the confidence interval piece is exactly the same, just instead of an average, it's a median. So let's go ahead and duplicate this. This is my favorite one. Let's drag the confidence intervals off the screen. We should have something that looks like this. Now, trend line. When we pull it up here, this is actually going to build and map a model for you based on what your data. There's actually 5 different types of models that you can build this in. To start with, let's just drop it on linear. Linear models, linear regression models are very, very easy to understand. I'm not going to teach a full class on them, but essentially what it's going down to is just minimizing the distance between where your points are at, each individual point, and where the line is at. So it's trying to minimize the distance between those two things to give you a linear, it's not changing, model to do this. So what you would do is you would take this model, it gives you your formula right there. It gives you your R-squared value and p-values, which is essentially just how significant it is. Don't need to worry about it right now. And what you could do is you could actually take, I'll show you how this works. Let's go ahead and take this value. You don't need to follow this part. But if you go describe trend lines, it gives you this equation. Sales equals 4,834 times the month plus 888,000, whatever. So essentially the month here is just labeled 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So if you copy and pasted this formula, actually you don't even need to copy and paste it. If you just did times 13, that would give you what your predicted next value is. If you did times 14, it would give you 2 months ahead. If you did times 15, it would give you 3 months ahead, so on and so forth. If you are into stats or you really need to be specific on your data science, it gives you some additional values too, which I'm not going to cover in this class.
How did you get the describe trend line?
Yep, just right click on it, describe trend line, and it pops up here. There's the same exact options as before. If you hit edit, actually those aren't the same options as before. There should be a format. I guess trend lines are a little different. So I'm just going to do this on my calculator. If we do 4843 times 13 plus 8870 equals 66,000. So right here, the last one was about 69,000. One before that was 78,000. One before that was 31,000. So if we just follow this line forward, it's saying the next one should be at about 66,000, which would be about right here. So it's pretty in line with what you'd expect there. And each one of these, right, have a different value on it. Okay. Linear trend lines, very, very easy to understand. I guess I will cover one quick thing, and I don't want to get a rabbit hole here, but the p-value, that's basically how closely, yeah, this is important to cover, so I'm going to cover it. P-value is how closely your trend line maps to the actual data. So if you have a ton of points really high above or really high below, if you don't, all of these do kind of an up and to the right trend, so it makes sense. But the smaller your p-value is, the better. So this one, 0.01, if you move that over, that's 10%. That's actually not that great. So maybe we want to try a different trend line. So if we pull this over, logarithmic, we don't have enough data points in there. Let's toss on exponential. Now, instead of a linear chart here or a linear graph, we have an exponential graph. And you can see maybe it fits a little better. If we check the p-value, though, is 0.11. I can't remember what the other one was. 0.12. So it is a slightly better fit going exponentially. I'm like, hey, we're going to have exponential sales going up to the right, potentially. Polynomial, you can drop on here. It looks like we do kind of have some seasonal, like spring boosts in sales every single month. So if we hover over that, yeah, p-value is 0.11. It fits this one in 2017 really well, 0.009. But essentially what you'd want to do to see which trend line you would use is you would drag it onto each one of these and then just hover over and see what your p-value is and choose the one that has the best fit.
What would the best p-value be closest to 0?
Yep.
Actually, if you go back to the just linear, if you look at 2017, that p-value is insane.
Yeah. Yeah. That is a really, really good fit there. That's a great call.
Is there a way you can do, maybe it wouldn't make sense even to do it, but like to do a different one per pane, so that way it could track it the best?
Yeah, actually, what I'd say the best way to do it here. Let's go ahead and rename this. Yeah, let's rename it. Linear trend line 1. Let's duplicate it. The right way to do this would not actually be having a separate one by pane. So if we drag month off of here, and then we change year to be that month year, this is probably the right way that you'd want to do it. To look at like your trends over time. And really what we're getting into here is kind of a good segue, is like, well, we have the seasonal trends in here, and we have, the end of the year is always good as well too. So really when you're working with like dates, you'd probably want to use a forecast, which we're going to get to, which is forecasting what things are going to be over time. Because I will be able to take seasonality into account as well too. But yeah, you're right, Marcus. There's different use cases depending on the different panes. Maybe we have exponential sales in 2017 because things are going up and to the right, whereas in 2015 things were a little flatter. So you definitely want to play around a bit and find the best fit based on the data that you're working with. Okay, let's actually take a quick break because the next two deserve dedicated time and attention, and I don't want to rush it. So let's take 10 minutes. Let's be back here at 7:21.
Hey, so for the creating data sets, I set the bar way too high. And I already started, but I did. I'm trying to take stats for every single NFL team. So
Okay.
like how many yards, how many rushing attempts. I got through 20 teams. There's just so much fucking information. And then once I get that, I'm gonna start plotting like by teams, like how much yards they gave, rushing yards, uh, um, how many receptions to running backs they give up. It doesn't matter if they're home, if they're away. Dude, I'm putting like, because me and my buddy got into it, or not like in a good way. We got super involved and we started looking at it, and we're like, okay, we're gonna do this. He's like, I'm gonna do this for sports bets. He's like, we're gonna beat Vegas. So I was like, oh yeah, I got some picks. There's these players that no one really hears about, but he's averaging 2 catches a game. You know, so
Right.
we look him up and we're like, we're gonna beat Vegas. We're gonna beat Vegas. So we look up his odds. The Vegas already knows who he is. So like, damn, we thought we were gonna outsmart him, but yeah, we started laughing. It was great. It was fun.
I love it. The NFL's pretty good at publishing data. So like, if you just go to NFL.com/stats, let me pull this over. At the very top, there's like player stats, which is all like sorted really nicely here. So you should be able to just like copy and paste all this into Excel. There's also team stats if you want that broken down by like passing, rushing, receiving, so on and so forth. Offense, defense. The next gen stats are super cool, where it has like speed, top speeds, fastest ball carriers. You can go down probable completions, fastest sacks, stuff like that. So I'm not sure how you're collecting the data right now, but there's definitely some pretty good aggregated data inside of just NFL.com.
Yeah, I got like some football guys or whatever. They had everything, and I'm just putting it into Excel sheet. That's like because I couldn't find one, to download. So I'm
Right.
putting it in my hand.
I love it. Keep us updated. If you find any can't lose bets, let us know.
Yeah, I'll try.
All right. Give me 1 second here. I just have to reply to my boss real quick.
You better be getting some OT with all this texting and phone calls after hours.
I know. I wish. All right. Cool. So last couple, we can actually, let's go ahead and just start a new one here, get some repetition in. I'm just going to rename this to linear trend 2. All right, let's start a new sheet. Let me double check my PowerPoint. Cool. Let's do, gosh, I love this one. Okay, let's do just like we did before, order date, year on columns, order date, month on columns. Whoops. Make sure it's the month with just the month. And then sales on rows. Same thing we built a million times here. Go back to analytics, drag forecast over here, add a forecast, and boom, it gives us 2018 every single month with a line and a confidence interval. So when we were talking about the trend lines before, we're like, oh, there's a spike in the spring. It was able to pick up on that historically. It's like, okay, it's kind of flat in the summer months. It was able to pick up on that. It spikes again in the winter months. It was able to pick up on that. It also picks up from 2014, 15, 16, 17. Each month we get a little, or each year we get a little higher. It was able to pick up on that as well. This is extremely, extremely, extremely powerful. Seasonality forecasting is an absolute bitch to do by hand or by computer. And Tableau just drags it in automatically. Let me... Okay, so you can't just right click on this because it's on the chart here. But up above, there's an analysis tab. If you click on that, hover over forecast and show forecast options, it will pop up a little pane that looks like this. So by default, shows the next 13 months, essentially just a year. You can choose exactly. Maybe I want to show exactly, by default it's years. Maybe I want to show, 3 years out. You do that right here. Notice the further and further out, the further and further your confidence intervals get across because it's less confident in its prediction 3 years in advance. Analysis, forecast options. Aggregate by months. If you just wanted to show like a yearly prediction here, you could do that. But since we have months and years in here, we'll keep it automatic. By default, it ignores the last period. So you can see December 2017 is actually forecasted here. The reason it does that is just in case your month isn't all the way completed. If you had something with, this was live data and our most recent month would be October. Well, we only have 2 days into October, so it ignores that. But since this is historical data, we can bump that down to 0 if we wanted to. If we had any missing values in here, we can choose that. The forecast model, if you wanted without seasonality, which I don't know why you would ever want, see how then it just gives us a flat line moving forward. That's not baking in those spring and winter trends like we'd seen before. So we want to include that automatic. If we had custom, it gives you some different trends in here, but we're not going to get into how to forecast other than Tableau. So let's just leave it automatic. And then you can see, once again, those 95% confidence intervals are bumping in here. So if we wanted to change that to 99, notice how they get wider, but we can be more confident. We bump that down to 90. It gets a little bit tighter, depending on the use case.
I probably should have waited till week 6 or day 6 to ask this, but how did you get the file data, like all the header stuff up there, like in the top of your, like right under book 1? I'm in the web version, but I don't have like a file, like, where it says shows in your top left, like
yeah,
anything
there's
else?
a lot of what I'm learning. I don't work in the web version very often. I'm learning.
I'm actually on the desktop version.
Oh, okay. Are you on a Mac?
Sadly.
Okay. Is there different options on Macs? This pane up here with like file data worksheet.
Yeah, I don't have that, and I guess I don't really know where I'd go to check. I hate using this thing. I have Windows for work, which I love, but didn't feel like trying to download it on my work computer.
It's actually pretty common for the Mac versions of programs to not have that bar for pretty much any program.
Really?
But you should have a couple colored dots or something in the same area
I got
of the colored
those.
dots.
Those just take me back. Sorry, it's my home screen then.
I think, Marcus, based on in class, one person's was showing by default. The other person, if you hover your mouse up at the top of the screen and just leave it there for a second, it should drop down.
What? They're lucky. I'm not getting that. Maybe it's just mine. It is what it is. I guess if there's other ways I can get around it, I just.
Are you in full screen?
Standard. I don't have the entire view going. Sorry to take us off topic.
No, you're fine. I'm just doing some Googling right now.
I don't know if this helps, but last week I had the same problem, like with some of the window bars not showing, and I guess my screen settings weren't fitting. Maybe checking that as well.
Okay. Yeah, I'll see what I can find there. You said screen settings?
Yeah, because when I would like click on some of the sidebars for the sales to, that little window at the bottom to get like group by, it wouldn't show up, so I had to change the size settings.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
On the Tableau help site, they mention how it's just a Mac thing, how it doesn't have that top bar, but you should still be able to access it. Like whatever program you're in, Mac has a default location where you can pull that up. So I guess for the others, it was hovering. It might, I don't know if somebody else owns that Mac and you're just borrowing it, if you could ask them. But
it's our family one. I use my work one for almost everything else, but my wife wanted one of these and she loves them. I don't use it every day, so I don't really know it as well as.
Yeah, they're just saying it's however that user interface is formatted on your Mac is where those are hiding.
Gotcha. Sounds good. All right. Well, I'll just mess around with it more. I'm sure I'll figure it out, and I'll check out the Windows as well. So thank you guys. Sorry about that.
No, you're fine. Okay. Luke dropped some screenshots in the chat as well too. Any other questions on forecasting specifically? It's kind of if there aren't questions, that kind of speaks to the amaze factor in Tableau. Like we didn't cover at all about how to build a model for that. We didn't cover at all about all the different parameters that you can drop in. Like the fact you can just drag and drop and it works and it like makes sense to everyone is why it's so amazing. So really, really cool. The last one is going to be putting my data science, machine learning explanation skills to the test here, which is clustering. So I'm going to give a quick overview. Have you guys ever heard of the difference between supervised and unsupervised learning, machine learning models? A couple nods, a couple shakes. Cool. That means I get to give you the intro. So most machine learning models are what's called supervised learning. And what supervised learning means is you give it a whole bunch of data points to train it on that has the outcome you're trying to predict. So like we talked about the Titanic data set a few weeks ago, right? That gives you their gender, their age, what class ticket that they had, if they were in a family or by themselves, a whole bunch of these different data points. And then at the very end, it gives you, did they survive the Titanic crash or not? And it's a great machine learning model because you see that like women and children survived, people first class tickets survived, things like that. If you're in a standard ticket and a man, you probably, helped them get the votes off and stayed back, whatever. But you toss that all into a machine learning algorithm, and it goes through all those different data points and trains itself based on if they survived or not. So yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. It's supervised because there's an answer, there's an outcome to the training of that model. So then you can give it new data points and say, are they going to survive or not? And it can say yes or no. So it has the outcome or the output variable defined in the data set. Unsupervised machine learning, and what k-means clustering is an example of, is when you don't have the outcome variable defined. So let's say I want to come up with clusters or groups or segmentations, whatever you want to call it, based on bill or trends customers. And I want to look for like, what are my hypothesis is we have like enterprise customers, we have SMB, small, medium-sized customers, and we have kind of entry-level customers as well. We don't have a data point that tells us that. We don't have a firmographic data point that says, this is an enterprise customer, this is an SMB customer, this is an entry-level customer, right? Those are just the groupings I kind of came up with in my head. But what you can do is you can toss all the data that you have and say, hey, find customers that are most similar to each other. So it's not trying to predict an output. It's not supervised. You're not saying predict if it's SMB or enterprise or entry level. You're not saying did they survive or not. We don't have that data point. We're giving it everything that we have and saying just find us customers that are most similar together. Maybe it's not enterprise and SMB and entry level or whatever, but it will take all of those and say, hey, these are the most similar, these are the most similar, and these are the most similar. You have 3, maybe 4 or 5. It automatically detects what the ideal number of clusters is. But here are the kind of 3 groupings or clusters of customers that you have. Then what you have to do is go in and define or describe what you want to call those customers. So you can say, okay, these customers are paying us a lot of money. They have a ton of employees. They've been in business for a long time. These are probably enterprise. But it requires a level of you going in and validating. And maybe you're not seeing those trends. Maybe you're seeing something else. So you have to dive into the data and say, what are these clusters? What are they making up? But then once you have them defined, you can toss in new data points and it'll spit out cluster 1, cluster 2, cluster 3, whatever it could be. And okay, cluster 2 is this type of customer, cluster 3, because you've gone in and done it. So it's unsupervised, meaning you're not giving it a data point that it can predict. You're just giving it everything and seeing what it spits out together. So that's the difference, a really, really, really high level understanding or description of the difference between supervised and unsupervised. So some of the trend lines that we did in this forecasting here, right? That would be an example of supervised machine learning or supervised model building, where it has, here's the month, here's the sales, here's the month, here's the sales, here's the month, here's the sales. Go out and predict for a month what the sales is going to be. Long-winded explanation. I will send some documentation in the chat if you guys are in Slack, if you guys want to do more understanding of k-means clustering. But what k-means clustering is going to do is if I just give it a whole bunch of data point, it's going to find how many clusters I have. So to give a really, really easy example, and this isn't where k-means clustering is super powerful, but to help you understand what I'm talking about, let's start a new tab. Let's do, let's just double click profit and double click sales. And then let's drag on product name to details. I'm trying to think if that would be good. Let me play around with a few different of these. Maybe let's just do subcategories so it's a little easier to see here. Okay, so we have the scatter plot. And we have, again, it's just 2 dimensions right now, profit and sales, broken out by our subcategories. Say we want to group our subcategories internally as, maybe high earners or low earners or something like that. High margins, low margins, whatever it could be. You can see just looking at this, there's not really a trend in any direction. There doesn't look to be any rhyme or reason. It's kind of chaos. If we go over to analytics and we grab cluster and we drop it onto clusters here, it says, okay, variables, sum and profit, number of customers or clusters. Let's just keep it automatic. Close out of this. Now you can see, let's make this a little bigger. Let's change this to be circles to make it a little easier to see. It came up with 2 clusters, cluster 1 and cluster 2. All this is saying is that this grouping here is alike and this grouping here is alike. It's not giving us any other information. We now have to go in and say, okay, what makes cluster 1 cluster 1? What makes cluster 2 cluster 2? I'm looking at this right now. Cluster 1 appears to be kind of the upper right quadrant. So a ton of sales and a ton of profit. So high volume, high margins, high profitability. These are where we make our money. Cluster 2 could be lower sales, lower profit, lower margins. These are the things that are maybe ad hoc features or something like that. Now, this is a good way, and there's a ton of machine learning that goes into this. It's actually really interesting. Let's see if I can find a k-means GIF so you can see how this is working. That one's all right. Yeah, this one's pretty good. Where did it go? So the way k-means works, if you're actually building it out, gosh, that's annoying. I just get my one. Here we go. Is it will go and it will pick a random number of points in a random location on your chart. And then it will go and measure how many points are closest to that, how many data points are closest to that point it picked, and how far away they all are from each other. So this is essentially mapping how far away they all are from each other. Sorry, let me pull this up. And then it will go through and it'll pick a different point. You can see how the X's each here are moving each time. The number of clusters are moving each time. And you can see it's mapping how far away all the data points are to the cluster centers, the X here. And when you see this big drop off here, it's called a hockey stick analysis. You want to find, we're getting way too into the weeds right now, apologies. But you want to choose basically where the hockey stick starts to level off here. So adding any additional number of k-means clusters is not adding any additional value, which means that the points that they have on the map are in the center, as exact as it can be, of each cluster. So it's a little bit anticlimactic when you're just bringing in 2 variables here, because you could just look at this chart and see this kind of cluster, right? But imagine if we gave Tableau 10 different variables. We can't visualize stuff in 10-dimensional space, so we can't just toss it on a chart in here. But it will go in and it'll do that same concept in 10 dimensions. It'll look at all the different data points that it has on there, where they're plotted, how close they are to each other, and come up with these clusters of customers. It could be 100 different data points, that all of those data points are the closest to each other. So we start getting a little abstract, and I feel like I'm describing Interstellar right now. But the point is you can toss in, and we could have done this here, right? If we just start a new thing here, do sales and profits, just to start subcategory under our colors there, or subcategory under our details. It gave us the option here, right? If we want to bring in additional variables here, we can go in and say, okay, let's look at discounts as well. Let's look at quantities as well. And it will go in and it will bring all of those into each other and choose the number of clusters that we have. So the goal of this is not for you to understand k-means clustering. The goal of you is to understand that Tableau can do it for you. I'm happy to ask questions if you have any, but there's not really a good way to teach this without having 8 weeks dedicated just to k-means clustering, if that makes sense.
I have just a tiny question.
Yeah, ask as many as you want for sure.
So I noticed that there's like a, how many clusters do you want to control? That change it to 5 to see what it would do. How does it default to 2? Does it default to the number of dimensions, or you just always have to specify the number of clusters?
It will default based on which number of clusters gives you the the minimum distance between those clusters with the minimum number of clusters itself. So obviously, like this is what's happening here, is once it filters around this 4 or 5 number, it's saying, okay, we're not getting any better by adding additional clusters in here. So it'll always give you the minimal number of clusters with the minimum distance between them. At some point, you get to the point where adding in 5, 6, 7, 8 doesn't decrease that distance between them anymore.
But it still does like make it interesting in terms of like seeing how they're grouped, like how it's clustering. I can imagine trying to. You said earlier, like, well, what does clusters do? I can imagine using that same sort of activity here and saying, what does clusters do? Imagine 5 clusters. I don't know if it's probably simple.
Yeah, let me give you guys a real life use case. And again, we're divulging from data viz and getting into data science, but that's okay. I've used k-means clustering one time in my life, and it was actually a really interesting activity. We wanted a way of grouping our customers at Builder-Trend into good, better, best. The reason we did that is we had 3 level of customer success members, our customer success teams, which is like key account manager, senior account manager, account manager. So we wanted to make sure our best customers were with our senior or key account managers, our medium customers were with our senior managers, whatever. But we knew we wanted that to be based on which customers retained the best with us. But we weren't sure what we should look at to say, do they retain with us or not? Are they going to renew their subscription or not? So we tossed every data point that we had into a k-means clustering model. And it can handle categorical or numerical data. It's really impressive. And it spit out, and we chose 3 clusters. In reality, I think the optimal amount was 2 clusters. We have good customers, we have bad customers, but we said we wanted it to be 3 because we had 3 different levels on our customer success team. Then we had to go in and look at, again, it just spits out cluster 1, cluster 2, cluster 3. It doesn't say these are good customers, these are bad customers. It's just saying these customers are the most like each other. These customers are the most like each other. These customers are the most like each other. So then what I did was look at cluster 1, cluster 2, cluster 3, and analyze their historical performance. That's not something we gave the model. That would be a supervised model to say, look at if they retain or not and train based on that. We just gave it everything and said, find the most similar customers. So then I looked into it and it's like, okay, cluster 2 retains at like 99%. Cluster 1 retains at like 75%. Cluster 3 retains at like 50%. So now I know cluster 2 is our best customers. Cluster 1 is our medium customers. Cluster 3 is our lower tier bad customers, whatever you want to call it. What that allowed us to do then is when a new customer signs up, we give that model the same exact data points that everything else had. And it can automatically say, hey, this is a cluster 2 customer, go to this account manager. Or hey, this is a cluster 3, go to this account manager, so on and so forth. So it was a way of, because then we didn't have to wait for if they were going to retain or not. We didn't have to train based on that. And we didn't have to pick which data points were important to us. We just let the model dictate it for us. So there's always an extra step based on your use case with clustering. But the point is this going to find the most similar or the closest together things there? Then there's the added benefit as well, too, of those account managers always working with the same type of customers. So they didn't have to say, hey, I'm working with a roofer right now. And then the next day I'm working with a pool builder. And the next day I'm working with a new home builder. But we could just make it so much more specific than just what type of job they were doing. We could do how many customers they or employees they have. And maybe the cluster spit out a pool builder with 10 employees is more similar to a home builder with 2 employees than it is to a remodeler with 100 employees, right? It makes those decisions for you. It's really, really fancy. It's really, really interesting to me and really, really powerful. It's tough to teach it in a data viz class because the powerfulness of a k-means clustering is not to visualize something. So the use cases in Tableau are somewhat limited, other than the fact that you could do it and then pull it out of Tableau and use it for something else. But I'd be remiss if I didn't at least mention it in this class. Any other questions? Okay, that is the end of tonight. We are going to keep going into Monday to work ahead a little bit. Let me see if there's anything else I missed. I don't think there's a couple things I'll just cover real quickly down below here. Reference line, is exactly the same as above. Reference bands are kind of interesting because you can choose right, if you just want to show a band instead of a line, you can do that. Distribution band is essentially the same thing as a confidence interval. You can just go in and choose. It's just different options. So you can build these same exact things with the options above. These are just out of the box things. Okay. I'm trying to think. We'll decide at the end what I want the homework to be. Feel free to save this and publish. I'm actually going to save this and publish it to Tableau Public just so I have all this. But we're going to actually create a new document to get into some of the other stuff. So let's go. Okay. Once you have it saved, feel free to close out of it and just pretend we're moving on to night number 7 right now. So I'm going to go ahead and show you guys, I don't think I've done this yet, what our final project will look like. And I think you'll understand why I want to work ahead a little bit. So we're going to build a self-service dashboard. We've talked a lot about really kind of 2 types of dashboards you'll build. One is like EDA type, where you're learning for yourself. One would be kind of something you're going to publish in a live view that's going to update. Another super powerful kind of dashboard is what I like to call a self-service dashboard, where you're going to give Tableau, you're going to give a dashboard to an end user to allow them to do their own EDA, exploratory data analysis, without having to know Tableau. You're essentially going to create for them a more user-friendly Tableau instance. They don't need to go into desktop. They don't need to have Tableau skills. They don't need to take this course, but they can still dive in and explore the data. So I think it will make more sense once I show it here. So a use case would be, our VP of sales wants to dive into like which teams are performing the best. I could spend 5 weeks going in and providing a recommendation to him, or I could just build him a self-service dashboard and say, go answer any questions that you have yourself. This would be kind of a use case of that. So there's 2 kind of main components into this dashboard. The first is a map view, and the second is a scatter plot here. To start with here, we're looking at profit margin by state, and we're looking at the number of sales, or the count of sum of sales versus the number of orders here. By default, we're looking at subcategory. However, and you can see it's colored by profit margin on both of these. I could change this from profit margin. If I click into this, I have days to ship, which we've built before. I have average discount. I have profit margin. I have quantity. I have sales. I have orders. There's a few different things that we built, a few things that we haven't built before. By default, there's profit margin. Let's change that to days to ship. So maybe he's curious how that changes based on location. This updates, this updates. Let's change to quantity. So how many things are being ordered? California orders a ton of different things, a ton of binders, it looks like, which is interesting. I could change it to whatever I want it to be in here on this side, and it updates both of these. I can also change what I'm grouping by. So see how it says sales versus orders by subcategory? Maybe I want to look at the shipping mode here. Now I have same day, first class, second class, standard class. Maybe I want to change that to be sales by state and sales versus orders. Maybe I want to look at individual products, which is going to get crazy. Advanced copiers, Canon, ton of sales, not very many orders. Must be really, really high value. Maybe I don't care about sales versus orders. Maybe I want to understand what's my profit margin by the number of sales. Now it says sales versus profit margin by product name. Profit margin down here. This is colored by sales, showing sales versus profit margin. Maybe I care about discounting. You can see it as you would expect as you discount more and more and more. Discounts is up here. So higher discounts has negative profit margins. We got to stop discounting these groomers, upright vacuum. Maybe in different cities we have here. So you can see I'm changing what we're coloring by. I'm changing what we're grouping by. I'm changing what's on the X and Y axis. This is stuff that would take us, I did the math one time, how many different permutations are on this dashboard. It's like tens of thousands different permutations. So we could go out and build 10,000 different views and publish all of them, and you click through all one by one by one. Or we could make this dynamic enough to hand over to him and say, answer any questions you want. The thing I haven't even shown yet in here is maybe I only care. California is really interesting to me, right? We're seeing a ton of sales. If I click into California, this then updates colored by sales for state California. Now is by Nebraska. Now is by Texas. So there's 50 different things that we could go through here. And then the last cool thing, and this is like kind of a lame example, but I could hover over New York and I actually embedded a little learn more button in here, which will take me to the New York Wikipedia page. So we do stuff like that. If we were showing customers or something like that, you embed the URL to like their Salesforce instance and they can tell you more about the customer or whatever. So there's literally tens of thousands of different permutations in here. We built one dashboard and turned it over to the end user to let them explore with it. And they can do all this in a really, really user-friendly way without having to know how to use Tableau. This is what all of you will build on night number 8. And believe it or not, we've learned 80% of the concepts to build this already through this portion of the class. So my goal is night number 7 to build the framework for this. So we'll actually, on Monday, we'll build the bones to make this all work, just with a couple of different things in here, 1 or 2 things in here, nothing in here. And then night number 8 will just be going in and making it a bit more robust. But I want to talk about some of the concepts of this tonight, so that we don't have to spend time doing that on Monday and can just actually start building it. Any questions before we dive into this on just like this dashboard, use cases for it, why we're building it, how it works?
Are we all going to be using Superstore data?
Yeah, I've tried it in the past using your own data sets, and it's just so hard to all work together. And then the last thing I'd want, because completion of this is the only requirement to getting your certificate on Wednesday. And I had people here for like 4 hours and I'm like trying to help them. And I'm like, I just don't think we can do it. Here's your cert. This just makes it easier for us to go through it all together.
Okay.
Okay. Let's take a 5-minute break just in case anyone needs to go to the bathroom or get something to eat real quick. And then we'll probably only go half an hour past this. Depending on how much we get into, we might just say no homework because I don't want to give you homework if we don't have time to work on it in class. So let's take a 5-minute break. Let's be back here at 8:03. Oh, shoot. No, that's right. All right, let's go ahead and get settled back in. I gave it a ton of thought during the 5-minute break. I think we're going to just cover 2 quick things. So I don't think we should be here more than half an hour. And then I don't think we'll do any homework as well. The analytics pane is interesting. You learn a ton, but it's not really the point of this class. So I don't think we need to practice it a whole lot other than just knowing it exists. And again, if I'm not giving you guys at least an hour for homework at the end, I don't want you to have to spend time outside of class working on that. So we'll go for another half hour to 40 minutes, and then we'll do no homework. So also fun fact, every time you open up Tableau, it gives you this viz of the day. These things are always super interesting. Customer support dashboard. I have a customer support team. I learn a ton of different stuff looking at these different things. So always click into those when you see them. Okay. New Tableau. Make sure your last one's saved. Superstore data. Orders. Okay. So the first thing we're going to hit on real quick is maps. So I know, Jonathan, you built one for your homework assignment. Pretty easy to figure out. The one thing to call out, there's a lot of different things to call out. The first thing to call out, we've briefly mentioned some of these little icons before. Anytime you see a little world or globe view beside one, that means that it's a geographical data point. Tableau actually has a ton of city, state, countries, zip codes, stuff like that loaded into it prior to this. So it can easily recognize when data points are coming in as one of those, and it automatically captures, hey, this is a city, this is a country, this is a state, so on and so forth. And then we've worked with this orders count before. That's a generated field that comes with. It's not in our data set, right? It's just counting them. There's also a latitude and longitude that come with it that are generated. That essentially anything that has this little globe icon by it, Tableau automatically knows the latitude and longitude of those different things. So it knows where all the different cities are at, countries are different things like that. To prove the point, just real simple, if we just double click state, you can see it automatically maps, and it's just doing the center point of each state. A little blue dot. We don't have a measure on there right now, but it's saying our columns are the longitude, our rows are the latitude, and our different details is each state in there. So it just gives us a little dot. There's 2 main types of maps in Tableau. The first is, if I click into here, well, the first would be if I just drug sales onto like size. It's going to give us kind of this density type map where, and let's make our size a little bigger so we can see it better. It just maps dots on top of each state. And you can easily see, hey, a lot of sales in California, a lot of sales in New York, not very many sales in Nebraska, South Dakota, right, so on and so forth. The second would be if I dropped sum of sales onto color. And now it's going to actually go in and give kind of a filled gradient of each state in there. So if you want the dots, you drop it onto size. If you want the filled gradient, you drop it onto color. But either way, it's showing the same thing here. Super easy to do, right? If I wanted to do like zip code instead, I think I saw zip code, right? Postal code instead of state. Oh, nope. Those aren't going to work. Wait, I did product ID. There you go. If we drop that, now you can see the individual zip codes that each of these are coming from. I could also do country instead of postal code. Right, they're all coming from the United States. Cities. What'd you say?
So the postal code first.
Yeah, so that's maps. For our dashboard, we'll be using state. Yeah, so if you just drag sum of sales onto size, I'll pop that in there this way. So you said postal code is cool. Oh yeah, that is really cool. But for the sake of working ahead, let's keep it as state. And let's keep it on this one. Oops. Color. My bad. So something that looks like this. To get formatting options for the map, sorry, Marcus, this is going to be tough for you. You don't have this at the top, but you click into map here and do background layers. If you do washout, this is just saying like how dark you want the overlaying background here. The easiest thing to do that I use most of the time is just drag that up to 100 and it just shows you, right, data ink ratio. We don't care. Well, we love Canada and Mexico for sure, but we don't care about them in this context because there's no data on there. Everyone knows the shape of the United States. But if we don't have that on there, you can add different things in there if you want to show like different terrain or coastlines. You can see it pops those up there, streets and highways.
I figured it out if with the right clicking I was able to actually get to this. So
oh, there you go.
Yeah, thankfully.
So basically how much information you can change some of these background layers. But I typically like, again, we'll uncheck everything or just use that washout feature. There's also different data layers in here. Why is this not on one page? That's really annoying for me. Huh. Must be something weird with my monitor. Well, I can't really see this. Sorry, let's go back to map. Background layers. Reset to defaults. I can choose some different layers on here. So I think this is average annual income or median annual income. And it will give you, if I drag off that off of color and maybe put sum of sales back on the size or something. It is now colored by the 2018 household income median. So that's an additional data point that Tableau just gives you by default. So you can actually start looking into like, is some of your data correlated with median income? Kind of, right? California and Washington are both high income states. New York's kind of in the middle. Lower income. Texas is medium low income, right? So we'd be taking some leaps there. But there's a lot. I don't know why this isn't showing, but there's a lot. Can you guys see it? This isn't just me, right? Or this is just me, right? Can you see the names of these?
No, I did the same for me too.
It's doing the same for me as well.
That's so weird. Well, that kind of makes it hard to use if you can't see it. Let me see. Give me 1 second. Let me open up.
You can drag that box out, hover over that line between the pages and filters.
Oh.
There you go.
Oh, okay. Dumb. So if you drag this line in between right here, it gives you a bit more room. But now I can't scroll up and down. Oh, okay. There's not a whole lot. You just hover. But this is all free, shipped with Tableau, economic data that you have in there. So if you want to click, average or median age, male-female ratio. I mean, the Superstore data is all fake data, right? So I doubt there's going to be too much correlations in here. But it's really, really interesting and a good way to like normalize your data a bit. Like Builder Trend signs up a ton of people in Texas and California. And it's like, oh, those are really, really good states for us. It's like, let's just look at like households, right? That's where most people live. So it makes sense that they're building the most houses, right? So we could normalize how many people we sign up by the household values in there. It's a really powerful tool that comes for free with Tableau. We won't be using it specifically. Oh, you can actually get it. Oh, cool. So you can get it on a different level than what you're grouping by. So now I'm showing households as my layer, and I'm showing it by county, even though I'm grouping by state on my data. So there's some really cool different data layers that you can add in here for our specific project. Again, will be really boring and just have this completely washed out to make it simple. But that's maps. Any questions? Comments, concerns? Everyone loves maps. Everyone thinks maps are really, really cool. I toss it in my dashboards all the time. I don't know if it's the best. I don't think it's the best way to view data. I'd rather see my states like stacked in a bar, descending order or something like that. But when you have a map in your viz, people just go crazy for some reason.
Can you create a map that's just for Nebraska, not the entire country?
Yeah. So all you would do there is actually just drag your state onto your filters. Just choose Nebraska. Right, this is going to filter down. And now that we're at the state level, maybe now we can look into like what our postal codes look like. But now, right, the background's washed out. We don't have our state in there anymore. So we'd want to go back. Now we can't tell unless you guys are really up on your counties and postal codes and can recognize those. We'd probably want to bring this back down a little bit.
You also have labels, right?
Yeah, you know, as labels. Moving around on maps is kind of hard in your view. There's some different tools, right? You can zoom in, zoom out. If you click this little button, you need to choose this Pane key to actually move it around, which is kind of annoying. If you want to zoom in on a specific area, you can drag and drop like that. If you want to choose a circle, I don't know. I don't really use these a whole lot. If you want to lasso something. But yeah, to move around, that's how you move around here. There are some, if you wanted to show just Nebraska, there's some advanced stuff that we could do to wash out everything but Nebraska, but it's not super simple to do. But if you have questions, you can stay late and I can walk you through it. 68104, baby.
How did you wash out the areas surrounding the U.S.? For me, it's still keeping the lines and names.
Oh, interesting. So what I did, I had state on there. I got rid of this. Zoom out. All I did was background layers and just drag this up to 100.
Oh, I was looking at the clicks, the checkboxes.
Oh, yeah. Yep. Okay, it's not that hard to do, so I'll just show you guys real quick. Let's say that we have state on here in our filters, and we're just looking at Nebraska. And we want to group by postal code, but now we don't have our view of Nebraska anymore. If we bring latitude, we're going to use a concept we learned from an earlier class. Let's bring latitude up here again, right beside it in rows. And now we have a dual axis, right? Which means we can change things independently.
Not to interrupt, but I'm pretty sure your computer froze on us.
Your Tableau's frozen for us.
Oh, okay. Luckily, I've learned that all I have to do to fix that is stop sharing and start sharing again. Got it here? Is it updated now? Sweet. Thumbs up. Right, so now I kind of have a dual axis here. Actually, is this easy or not? Yeah, okay. So now we have our two tabs, right? This is the top one. This is the bottom one. Let's go ahead and drag state onto this bottom one and get rid of our sum of sales. But change it back to a map. So now it's just going to be a gray Nebraska. Now if I go up here and in my second one, hit this drop down arrow and do dual axis. Now it will give me the state outlined with our counties. Again, if we want to bring one to the front, you just rearrange the order of them. Now we have our counties posted on top of Nebraska with a washout. It's kind of a hack. It's kind of a workaround. I wish there was a way that you didn't have to do a dual axis to get this, but since you asked, I figured I'd show you. Any other questions on maps? No? Okay, one more concept for tonight, and I know that we're running on 2.5 hours here, so I'll keep it brief. But I'm hoping if I teach the concepts tonight, we'll be able to hit the ground running on Monday and not have to spend as much time. So let's start a new worksheet here. Let me actually, give me 1 second. Let me see if I have any beneficial slides about, we're going to talk about parameters. Parameters.
I think your screen sharing's messing up again.
Really? Well, the good
Yeah.
news is I'm not sharing anything right now.
Okay.
No, I don't really have anything super beneficial. Okay, so parameters at its core is essentially just us creating a data point in Tableau that lives outside of our data set. So we're essentially creating a variable. We're creating a global variable that we can use in our, but it doesn't exist in our data, right? We've created calculated fields before, but those are just new fields inside of our existing data. We're going to create a variable, or it's called a parameter, but it's a variable that lives outside of our data set, but lives in Tableau. So I'll show you how to do it, and I think it will make more sense once we start doing it. But we go to the same drop-down arrow here, like we're going to create a calculated field. And you can see the second, is my screen working, by the way? Okay.
Yeah.
The second option here is create a parameter. Let's just keep this really simple. And let's just call this like a sales goal. Now we can choose what data type we want it to be. A float just means that it has decimal places, right? So 1.1, 1.2, so on and so forth. An integer just means it's going to be whole numbers, so 1, 2, 3. A string just means it's going to be text, Charlie, ASDF, lorem ipsum, whatever you want to call it. Boolean is just going to be true, false. Date is exactly what it sounds like, October 2nd. Date time is going to be October 2nd, 8:21 p.m. To keep it simple, let's just choose an integer. Let's set the current value to like 50,000. I don't know. That's just what it's going to be by default. And then instead of allowing all values, yeah, we'll allow all values. So we'll keep it something like this. Name, sales goal, type, integer, current value, 50,000. Over here, right, we have our dimensions, we have our measures, we now have parameters. So let's see what this looks like. All you have to do is click the arrow here and click show parameter. All this is a number right now. It's 50,000. I can change it to be 20,000. I can change it to be.
Hey, Charlie, not to interrupt again, but it froze.
Right
when you hit pretty much okay. So we didn't see it go into the parameters on the left or anything.
Your screen, your picture froze too, I think.
Oh, this dang Wi-Fi. Now. Good. Okay. So all you do is hit this arrow right here and click show parameter. All this is, what is this thing? Gosh, I'm having a ton of technical difficulties tonight. This is just a number. It's just a number. It doesn't exist in our data source. It's not a field. It's not a dimension. It's not a measure. It's a number. But what's cool about this number is we can reference it. We can use it places. And we can change it whenever we want. So to make it really easy, let's just drag categories onto columns and sales onto rows. Now let's create, what would be the best way to do this? Let's create a calculated field. So hit this arrow up here, create a calculated field. And let's just say, let's call this hit goal. And we're just going to do a real basic if statement. If, let me make this bigger. Some sales greater than, now we can type in sales goal. And notice it's purple. Blues are functions, oranges are fields, purple are parameters. So we're saying if the sum of sales is greater than the sales goal, then yes, else no. End. So we've done something, I think we've done this exact example before, but we hard coded in here. If sum of sales is greater than 100,000 or something like that, then yes, else no. Now we're going to reference our new parameter that we just created. So if it looks like this, I'll give you guys a couple more seconds just in case. We can go ahead and hit OK. Now we have a new field, hit goal. Let's drag that onto color. Right now, they're all yeses, right? Because everything's greater than 200,000. But let's say I change this to 800,000. Hit OK. Now, only this one's greater, right? So this is our yes, this is our no. So we've done this before, but if we wanted to change the goal, right, we would have had to go into this calculated field. We would have had to edit. We would have had to update 100,000 with 800,000, hit OK. We can do that inside of Tableau Desktop. It's a few extra steps, but we can do it. Once we publish this to Tableau, though, no one has access to those fields anymore. They do have access to this parameter, though, so they can go in and they can update this to be whatever they want it to be. Does that make sense? What parameters are, at least, and how they work? I'm going to go through a couple more examples because this is really rudimentary example. Let's, yeah, this will be a fun one. Let's create a new sheet here. And let's create a new parameter. And let's just call this one measure parameter. This one, instead of a integer, we're going to make it a string. And instead of allowable values, we're going to make it a list. What we're going to do is we're going to create a parameter, which is just a list of options. And we're going to title them sales, profit. We'll just do those two for now. And I'll show you guys what I mean. So let's make a list. Let's type this in. Type it in exactly like this, capital S. Sales, hit enter, capital P, profit. And those are the only two we need. So as we're titling it measure parameter. It's a string. This automatically updates. It's a list, and our only two options are sales and profit. So if we hit OK, right, we have a new parameter down here called measure parameter. Let's click show parameter. So now in this drop down, you can see we have two options. So right now, our measure parameter is equal to sales. That is the value of our parameter. Now it's equal to profit. That is the value of our parameter. So now we can use this, and I'll show you a really cool way to use this. Let's create another calculated field. And let's call this dynamic measure. Again, this is going to be a real basic if statement. If measure parameter, right, should be purple, should look like this, equals single quote sales, then sales, our field. We're going to actually use this to dictate what measure we are showing on our chart here. So if it's equal to sales, then sales, else if, and we could just do an else, but if we wanted to add more stuff into it later, we'll do an else if. Measure parameter equals profit, then profit. End. So it should look like this. I'll give everyone a couple moments just to jot it down. Make sure this is purple. Make sure these are in single quotes. Make sure you type it exactly how we did over here, capital S, no spaces. These should be orange. I'll open it back up in a second. But we hit OK. Now you can see we have a new field here called dynamic measure. Let's check category over here. And let's drag dynamic measure onto rows. So right now, I am showing by category the sum of our dynamic measure. So what's this showing right now? We have 145 in what? 145,000, sorry.
In profit?
In profit. Yep, because in my dynamic measure here, I am saying if the parameter equals profit, return the field profit. So we're not just dictating an if else space, we're not creating a new like color scheme or anything like that. We're actually returning a whole different field based on what a whole different measure. We're still summing it up no matter what it returns, either sales or profits. But now, if I click into this and choose sales, this updates. So I could have made two different, right? I could drag, just to show you guys, sum of sales in here. I could have made two different views, or I could have made a dual axis, or I could have just showed them side by side like this. Or I could put whatever options I want to give someone in my measure parameter here and let them choose between the two. So you see this one is updating based on if I'm in sales or I'm in profit. These are static. They're not updating. It's just the sum of sales. It's just the sum of profit. And that is what, if I go back to my I closed out of it, but if I go back to my dashboard I showed you guys to start, that's what this is right here. This is just a parameter. I created a list. I put 7 different options in that list, and then it was just an if else statement. Base ship we've already made before. That's just that calculated field, date diff, order date, ship date. Average discount. In here, instead of just returning sum of sales, I'm just returning the average discount. This is sum of profit. We've already created profit margin before, right? That's just profit divided by sales. Quantity is by default in there. Sales is by default in there. This is just the count of order. So I'm making calculated fields. I'm aggregating stuff, and then I'm just tossing it into parameter. And based on what someone chooses, that's what it pops out. So that's all this is. And guess what? That's all this is too. So let's create one more use case for parameters. So in our measure parameter, right, in our sales goal, we created just an output, yes or no, based on if something was greater than the sales goal. In our measure parameter, we created a dynamic measure, which is going to return a specific measure based on what we're looking at. The last piece of this, the last thing you do, is you can also return different dimensions. So let's create one more sheet. This will be the last example we go through. Let's create a new parameter. And let's call this one our dimension parameter. This is also going to be a string. This is also going to be a list. And to make it really easy and avoid any typos, let's just do category. Again, capital C. You can actually type in your parameter whatever you want, right? As long as if you're in your if statement, you reference it. A good best practice and a good way to keep things consistent, hold yourself accountable, never have to second guess. I always just title stuff exactly as they appear over here because that just eliminates a ton of confusion. So category, exactly how it appears, capital C. And let's do region, do short, easy ones. Exit out of that. So again, it's title, dimension parameter, type string. It's a list with category and region. So if we hit OK, right, we have our new parameter down here. We now have 3. We hit the arrow, do show parameter to drop down category and region. If you ever want to change these, sometimes I like seeing what all my options are. If you just hit this little arrow here, it lets you know right now it's a compact list, right? You can see that's what's selected. If I do a single value list, you can see both of them at once. You can only choose one. You can make people actually have to type it in, but that's not a very good option. And a slider, you could just go between all of them. But again, you don't really see the thing. Some of those make sense based on different data points. I pretty much always choose a single value list so I can choose them all. All right, last time, create a new calculated field. And let's call this dynamic dimension. And just like we've done with the past two, we're going to go if our dimension parameter in purple equals category, then return the field category, else if dimension parameter equals region, capital R, single quotes, then region, end. So it should look just like this. Make sure your dimension parameters are purple. That just means you got it right. Make sure your fields are orange. Make sure these are single quotes and capitalized. Make sure you have your if, your else if, and your and. If everything looks good, it'll give you this nice thumbs up sign. Calculation is valid. So if we hit OK here. Now this time, the previous two we've created, right? Dynamic measure and hit goal were both down here because it was based off of measures. This one is up in here in dimensions. So if we drag this onto columns, right? And let's drag sales onto rows. It now gives us our region, central, east, southwest. However, if we click into category, it now changes it to furniture, offices, tech. Yeah. Yep. So if you hit this arrow right here, it's single value list. Yep. So now let's get really fancy since we've already created it. Let's, instead of sum of sales, let's bring up that dynamic measure that we just created. in the previous example. And let's drag that on top of sum of sales. So now we have our dynamic dimension on columns and the sum of our dynamic measure. We're only showing our dimension parameter right now. So let's come down to our measure parameter, hit that arrow, go show parameter. Maybe hit the arrow again, go single value list. Now we're showing by category our profits. Let's say we want to look at our sales by category. Boom, there's sales by category. Now let's look at profits by region. We can click that. Now we can go sales by region. Now we can go sales by category, right? So there's 4 different charts that we're able to create now without having to drag anything new on columns, without having to drag anything new on rows, completely user-friendly and self-service. We don't have to publish 4 different views now. We can just publish this one view, and our end user can click through and explore by themselves. So that dimension parameter, category versus region, that's all this is doing here, right? By breakout, I'm grouping by subcategory right here. I'm grouping by ship mode right here. I'm grouping by category right here. I'm grouping by product name right here. I'm grouping by city right here. These are just measure parameters. Right? They're the same ones we have over here. Profit margin. These are just measure parameters over here. This is just a measure parameter over here. So all we're doing, the only thing more complicated about this dashboard than what we've just built in the last 20 minutes is we just have more options. We have more calculated fields feeding into them. We have more options in our list, but it's the same exact concept. Fun fact, parameters were just rolled out by Tableau like 4 years ago. So before this, there was no good way to do this. You would have to create 100 different views or in this use case, 4 different views. And when they rolled it out, it was a huge deal, which is really, really cool. Any questions on parameters?
Wondering about the ability to do the axes with the names. It seemed like I was able to do the y-axis pretty easy with the axis. That axis shows up when I click on the left, and then I can choose in the title, like the measure parameter, for example.
Right.
How do I do that?
Oh, to show this up here. Yeah, great question. So the question was, right, this says dynamic measure here. That's relatively easy to change. We just double click into it. Instead of custom, we do use value, right? This is our measure parameter. So now if I click profit, this says profit. If I click sales, this says sales. But there's no way to change this. There's a really good, you can't change it by default. There's a really cool workaround, and I'll show you guys what it is real quick. So we're going to create a dashboard. Stick with me here. We're going to drag, what was that called? Sheet 4 over here. This is exactly what we were just looking at, right? Sales, updates, sales and profit. Our dimension parameter doesn't update. It just says dynamic dimension no matter what. The workaround to do this is really, I think it's cool. Create a new sheet. This is going to be a completely blank sheet. We're going to go up into the title here and double click. Get rid of it being called the sheet name and click insert. And down here we have our parameter options. Choose dimension parameter and hit OK. So now, right, if we show parameter, if we change this, it says region. If we change this, it says category. So what you'd have to do, it's a workaround. It's a hack. But what you do is you would then bring this over here, drag it on there, go up here, make it small, make this bold and 8-point font and center it. Hide this sheet title, hide this. And now it looks like what that was titled. And now if you change it, my Tableau is frozen. There you go. This updates region, category, region, category. It's a hack. It's a workaround. It's annoying. But that's actually what I'm doing. It's a good thing you asked that question, because that's what we're doing in both of these right here. See, if I hover over this, it looks gray. This is a completely different sheet than this is. And this down here is a completely different sheet than this is. And it's a good use case of when you'd want to use parameters in your title. Because guess what this is? My title right here, profit versus profit margin by city. If I change this to sales, profit by sales, profit versus sales by city, profit margin versus sales. So those parameters are changing dynamically, the title here. Colored by profit for state, right? If I change this to sales, this says colored by sales. And then it says for state all. If I actually click into one of these states, it says for state Nebraska. So the good news is parameters are covered. We can create this, we can create this, we can create this, we can create this, we can change that title. We know how to build scatter plots. We can change this, we can change this. We know how to build a map. The only thing that we haven't done here is what's called dashboard actions, which is when you click into something, it changes something else. But since we covered parameters tonight, we can cover dashboard actions Monday. We'll build out the framework for this Monday. This will be 75% done by the end of Monday. And then Wednesday, when we come in, we'll finish it out. All we'll do on Wednesday is stuff like this, right? We'll already have our dimension parameters or our measure parameters created. You guys will just go into here and update these, edit it, right? To also include subcategory, stuff like that as well too. So it won't be any new concepts that we've learned. They'll just be rounding out the ones that are already in there. Questions on parameters? Concerns? Anyone overwhelmed? Confused? Okay. I know we've been going for 2 hours and 45 minutes now, so everyone's probably brain dead. If you think of anything before Monday, Slack me. I'm happy to answer those questions via Slack. No homework for Monday. We don't need to practice the analytics stuff because we're not going to use it. It's not really data viz anyways, it's data science. We will cover parameters again on Monday, so that will likely be the homework for then. So I think we're good. Anything else? Sweet. Thank you all. We got through a shit ton that class. Impressive work. Appreciate you all. Have a good night.
Thank you. See ya.
See you guys.